Hello friends, and welcome back to Cine Club. We have been waiting for 2 years for It Chapter 2 to come out, starring James McAvoy, Jessica Chastain, Bill Hader, and Bill Skarsgård. When it comes to the adult stories of the Losers Club, we all know it is not the strongest part of the book or the 90s miniseries. Still, when Chapter 1 came out, it gave us hope that it would at least be better than the 90s version. They had everything going for it. The tone, the atmosphere was right, the directing, Pennywise was fantastic. Maybe for Chapter 2 they would make it grittier. Maybe, now that they're adults, they would up the scare factor and Pennywise would not hold back. Now that Chapter 2 has finally come out, we have no choice but to ask the question, which one was a better movie, Chapter 1 or Chapter 2? Let's start by comparing tone and atmosphere. In the first movie, right off the bat, you get the sense that you are diving into something terrifying, that whatever these kids are going to deal with is evil beyond imagination. In general, the movie had a perfect blend of genres, mixing adventure and horror, humor and suspense with the right balance. In Chapter 2, the genre proportions are a mess. The tonal shifts are too jarring. They want you to feel scared and worried for the characters, but then something funny happens in the middle of an attack and it undercuts the horror. While the movie does have good scenes of mixing funny and scary, it didn't work as well as the first one, especially when they were trying to build up Pennywise in the middle of the movie. Another issue with atmosphere is how Derry is barely featured in Chapter 2. In Chapter 1, they made sure the town felt like a character. Whether it was a side effect of Pennywise's presence, or the town itself helped him get away with his actions, Derry felt like an infection, an antagonist for the young characters. This carelessness and even hatred was represented through several characters: policemen, parents, teachers. The kids were on their own and no one was going to save them. In Chapter 2, it might as well have been an empty town. They took no opportunities to enhance how terrible the people in this town are. Yes, the opening scene depicts that with a hate crime, but it's never really tied to the main characters. It ended up being an excuse to show that Pennywise was back. Speaking of the devil, let's compare Pennywise to Pennywise. In my previous video, we compared Bill Skarsgård's performance to Tim Curry's, but now we have to compare Skarsgård with his Chapter 1 performance. In Chapter 1, Skarsgård triumphed. He dominated with his performance, he made the character his own, and even though he was evil, you couldn't wait to see him again and find out what he would do. He felt like a complete character. In Chapter 2, I kept waiting for him to do his thing, to have a good interactive scene for him to shine. But that almost never happened. Apart from a scene with a little girl, Pennywise feels like he's just on the sidelines. Yes, in the first movie he presents himself in many ways, not just as the clown, and that also happens in Chapter 2, but it just felt like there wasn't enough of him. There were so many iconic scenes with him in Chapter 1, and in the sequel, it felt like the credits should have said, "A small, minor appearance by Bill Skarsgård." Moving on to the other main characters, let's talk about the losers. There is no doubt the casting was brilliant. Every pick was pretty much perfect. That being said, I didn't love them as much as when they were kids, and mostly because I felt like I didn't know them at all. In Chapter 1, we got complete characters. We understood what made them losers and the traumas they had to endure. It was rooted in human emotions and in situations many people can understand. In Chapter 2, they just suddenly show up and that is all the development you get. Sure, we see for 2 minutes that Beverly ended up marrying an abusive man like her father, and Eddie married a younger version of his mom, but it's never talked about again. This is not to say they weren't fun. Like I said, casting was perfect. Bill Hader basically dominated as Richie and his dynamic with Eddie was everything. But the other characters who stood out last time became flat. Bill was not half as interesting as he used to be, and Beverly and Ben, who were some of the best characters in Chapter 1, felt flat and boring. I feel like if the movie had spent more time developing them as adult characters, instead of using flashbacks of new scenes of them as kids, the story would have felt more complete. I already know them as kids. I don't need new flashbacks. Present me these characters as they are now, their fears, their lives, their problems. Instead, they spend the majority of an almost 3-hour-long movie remembering their past and deciding whether they should stay or leave. Let's talk about the horror elements in these movies. In Chapter 1, every scare was memorable and amazing. Sure, it started with the iconic scene of Georgie and Pennywise in the storm drain, but the filmmakers managed to get every other horror scene right, even when they changed elements from the book. Each one was a treat to watch. In Chapter 2, they decided to use a lot more CGI than in the first one, and sadly it did not add anything to the scare factor. In fact, it took away from it. Every time a scene was set up for an encounter with Pennywise, the tension was there, the fear was there, and then when the CGI object or creature presented itself, it immediately took you out of the scene. The design of certain creatures was just goofy and silly looking. It didn't scream scary, it was more like Tim Burton scary. Speaking of, what was with the Danny Elfman-inspired score? I'm not watching a Disney movie with some semi-scary elements. This is a horror movie, not a straight-to-DVD adventure movie with some spooky creatures every now and then. But maybe that was the problem. Maybe the expectations that this was a horror movie was what messed up the enjoyment. Maybe if they had explained they switched genres and were going more for a Ghostbuster type of scary, maybe then it would have hit the spot. But I don't think the public was wrong in expecting a grittier, scarier horror movie than its predecessor, when the first trailer is as perfect as it was. How do you make me feel more scared by watching a trailer of Beverly's scene, and then when actually watching the real scene without censoring anything, I actually feel underwhelmed? Why does the trailer succeed and the movie fail in this scene? Chapter 1 definitely handled the horror a lot better, but maybe that's because it had a better understanding about what scared these children. Maybe it's just easier to scare children than adults, but maybe if we had a better understanding of the losers as adults, it would have been better. Past trauma doesn't just go away, it haunts you and keeps finding ways into your life. Why didn't they play that up? But like I said, maybe the problem is they switched genres on us and changed the proportions of funny and horror, and they just didn't tell us. So friends, you let me know, which one do you think was the better movie? It Chapter 1 or Chapter 2? Can you even compare them? Let me know in the comments section down below. I think you already know which one I preferred, but I'd love to hear what you think. You can also let me know on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter if you look for Cineclub channel. Don't forget to subscribe if you like these kinds of videos, and I will see you on our next movie date.